call this work session to order. The items on the agenda are district priorities update, academic interventions. Dr. Staley.
Yes, and as Dr. Boyson comes up, we have a few things that all kind of tied together in the academic interventions area that we're going to give an update today. The first is our SIPS program, which was expanded this year, and I was telling everybody I was out observing this morning in a SIPS classroom, and the word the student was working on was sipped. So I thought, well, maybe it's a verb now. You like got sipped if you were in the classroom. I don't know, but I found that ironic. Then we're going to give just an update on instructional coaching and a few of the modifications we made to that this year, and then the Kick-Up program, which is new. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Boyson.
Yep. And that Kick-Up program will embed into the instructional coaches part because we use that to monitor their information. And so that's how that's tied in together. So thanks for having us here today. We have our team with us today. We have Linda, Kristen, Demi, and Sarah, and then we have Dr. Fedden and Kat. Kat is the SPED instruction or intern, and then of course Doug and Nicole for assessment, Sarah for EL. So everybody's here as part of it. Abby and Sarah will give some of the SIPS information, and Linda will talk about the MAP fluency assessment as we get into that too. So everybody's got a little role in it, and we're all here to answer any questions. So today we're here to review the academic return on investment for the two programs, literacy intervention at the elementary level, and provide information on the impact of the Sioux Falls School District to with the instructional coach program. So we're going to start with really looking at these gears. And when we think of the Sioux Falls School District, we need lots of gears to keep moving to get our kids to that finish line. And how do we do that? And with that, we really need to make sure we have a guaranteed and viable curriculum that refers to what is taught, the scope and sequence, the pacing, to ensure the alignment that's with state standards and assessment. So again, how does that work? What's that look like? The instruction gear is how the curriculum is taught. The content is presented and supported with differentiation to support all students. And then the learner, all structures have to be in place to support that learner and support all learners in our schools. And then the environments, the classroom or the school environment where the instruction takes place. So really, again, often to support the classroom, the procedures, and student engagement. So we're going to start with SIPS, and we're going to look at that systematic instruction for phonological awareness, phonics and sight words, and we're going to give you a little history lesson here. So we look back to 2018-19. We had our first SIPS pilot, and we had two different programs going on at Hawthorne and Terry Redland. We had the SIPS program as it sits now. So we had a SIPS specialist at those two buildings to work with our first grade students. At Cleveland and Garfield, we had implemented SIPS into the classroom, and the classroom teacher was providing that instruction as the intervention. So after we looked at it, really the program that had the impact was Hawthorne Terry Redland model with that SIPS specialist. So we moved forward with that. 2019, we added 6 additional buildings. So we had all 8 of our Title I buildings providing services in SIPS, and that was funded through Title I and still is funded through Title I. In 2021, we added those second grade teachers, and that's a general fund. So that's how those 8 second grade teachers are funded. And then last year, we added 16 first grade teachers to support all first grades across the Sioux Falls School District, and those 16 teachers are funded through ESSER 3. So how do we measure their impact? And that's a good, anything we do, we want to make sure we're measuring the growth of our students. And what's that look like? So here's an elementary school improvement plan and the indicators that are used for that. So our kindergarten students, they're measured on the MAP reading fluency. And then first grade, second grade, same thing, percentage of students that meet that phonological awareness and phonics and word recognition on the spring MAP fluency. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because we have SIPS as the curriculum, and we have MAP as an outside tool to measure their growth, because there are things embedded within SIPS, but then we want to measure that on a different scale to ensure that they're growing as they should. And we're going to have Abby talk about the SIPS program and Linda to talk about MAP Reading Fluency to understand those scales. So I'll turn it over to Linda.
Good afternoon. So in 2018-19, the Sioux Falls School District started using MAP growth tests for math and reading. And although we continue to use that at 3-5, what we determined was that information that we were receiving was quite valuable, but we needed a more diagnostic look at our K2 students in those foundational literacy skills. And so we piloted the program MAP Reading Fluency in last year at 2 buildings with our SIP students and discovered that the information that we received from that tool, MAP Reading Fluency, provided us just a more in-depth look at how our SIPS instruction, how our reading instruction was really supporting our students with that foundational literacy skills. And so when you take a look, I'm going to flip over to the next, whoops, I hadn't flipped to that one yet. MAP Reading Fluency is an adaptive online test, and if you look at just that graphic that you see up there, that middle column that goes top to bottom, that's the entry point for our students, and that's where the test begins to adapt. So students enter that test at reading 15 sentences in 2 minutes, and then it determines a comprehension and accuracy score. If the students move up, they go to the oral reading passages and then continue on with some more extensive oral reading that is recorded through a microphone as they're taking that test. If not, they adapt down to the foundational literacy skills. And those foundational literacy skills are looking at letter names, letter sounds, word parts, those types of parts of words. Because of the adaptive nature of this test, of this assessment, we're able to more accurately determine specifically where those kids are performing and what their needs are in terms of an intervention. We also are able to compare them to our curriculum pacing guides as well as the South Dakota assessment standards that we would expect for our students. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Abby, and she's going to give you just a more in-depth look at how the SIPS program then works and blends and melds with MAP Reading Fluency. So Abby Doss, our elementary literacy TOSA.
And we're really looking at the first grade data, so when we present the data, it will be first grade because that was the expectation.
All right, so on the screen are a couple examples of types of tasks students are engaged in when testing their knowledge in phonological awareness, phonics, and word recognition. On the very left, in the box titled Phonological Awareness, the students are working on identifying, using, and manipulating the sounds in our language. The students do not see any letters in phonological awareness, rather they work with sounds in an auditory manner. The first iPad you see on that screen shows a picture of a raft. The students will hear the test say, raft. How many sounds do you hear in the word raft? The students would then need to count the number of sounds in raft that they hear and pick the correct number. On that second iPad, the student is working on changing or manipulating the sounds in words. For example, the student sees the picture and hears the word shop. The test then asks the student to change the ah in shop to I. What's the new word? The students then must choose the picture of the ship. In phonics and word recognition, the students now see letters or print. That's added in. In the first task here, you can see in phonics word recognition, the students are asked to build the word. The students see the picture of a chain and hear the word chain, and then are asked to build the word chain by clicking on the beginning, middle, and ending spellings for the word chain. The student in the picture picked the CH, you can see that already, for the beginning of the word, and now must choose the AI for the middle and the end to complete the spelling of the word chain. In the last example under phonics and word recognition, the student needs to read the word leaf and pick the picture that matches so we know there's an understanding of when they read the word. Here are just a few examples of how the assessment tests the student's skills in phonological awareness, phonics, and word recognition. Kind of holding those examples as we go forth, we're going to call those foundational skills, but this is what we're measuring when we utilize the test. All right, and so on this screen, we have just a couple of pictures of some SIP specialists in action here and a very short video. These SIP specialists are working on the guided spelling, guided writing portion, because we do not just reading, but we incorporate the writing alongside in SIPs. And so this very short video clip, you will see the students quickly reviewing sight words. The students have already been introduced to these words in context and are now reviewing them very quickly so that they become fluent and automatic. How do I get that screen to change?
W-A-N-T. Read once. Read here.
Hold on.
Here. Spell.
Oh, no, this is a good work session. I did love the little video clip of the Robert Frost kids playing the boy. That was awesome. So, how do I get into the screen? Hold on. Oh, no, this is a good work session. Video. Robert Frost kids playing the boy. Abby could model it.
Yes, it'd be okay. So basically the students,
Oh, we have to rewind it.
oh no, it's,
Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty. Sorry. So Abby,
in the
when in the video.
in the video, because these are sight words, they're supposed to be known quickly and automatically. The teacher will put up the word like people, and the students read it, people, and then they spell it P-E-O-P-L-E, read people. And they do that very quickly as they go through a set of 10 to 20 sight words every single lesson. And that's what you would see, that quick automatic pace. But if you're interested in seeing more videos on SIPs, I would suggest you check out Julie Treberg on the district website. She's one of the star headings right now. She is a SIPs teacher at Terry Redlin and one of the Sioux Falls School District featured staff stars. And you can kind of get a glimpse into SIPs classroom and the story there as well. No, you're okay. All right, we're going to jump into map reading fluency now, both the descriptors and the data that we have for SIPs. Before we look at the SIPs data, I wanted to give you some background information on how NWA map reading fluency scores students based on their performance at each level and how these scores are reported out. First, you will notice, there we go. First, you'll notice at the top that map reading fluency uses descriptors below, approaching, meet, and exceeds, which are color coordinated for our reference as well. NWA defines these terms as the following. Below are students performing below benchmark expectation. We have approaching the benchmark expectation, meeting benchmark expectation, and exceeding benchmark expectation. The benchmark expectations are set by NWA MAP and are adjusted based on the student's grade and the time of year at which the student takes the assessment. fall, winter, spring. The table below demonstrates this concept in first grade. The adaptive assessment measures students' performance in phonological awareness and phonics word recognition on a level 0 to 5 scale, which you can see at that top of the table. And then on the side of the table, you'll notice the testing terms and where each level falls in relation to the benchmark expectations. These expectations change in level as the year progresses. Notice in the fall in first grade that a level 0 and 1 is below expectation, that level 2 is approaching, level 3 is meeting, and a level 4 exceeding expectation, along with a level 5. In the winter, when the students took this assessment in December, below was now as level 0 through 2, approaching a level 3, and meeting a level 4 and 5, and no longer is there any exceeding expectation because students at this point in the middle of first grade should be meeting foundational skills in single syllable phonics. But as you notice in the spring, the level 0 to 3 are all below, and then we have approaching. There's no more meeting in foundational skills because at the end of first grade, students should have mastered foundational skills in order to meet grade level standards and foundational benchmarks. They will now be over into the oral reading passages side of the test, where they read multi-paragraph story, and they have to answer 6 comprehension questions to it. So keep this chart in mind as we move forward, looking closer at the SIPS data. We are first going to look at a graph specific to phonological awareness. Thinking back to a previous slide, phonological awareness was assessed using the picture of the raft, which students had to count the number of sounds in raft. And phonological awareness also assessed the students when they had to change the ah to an if, from shop to ship. The first 2 bars in this graph are comparing the number of students in the fall and in the winter who fell below benchmark expectations, or those, according to NWA, who are in the red. As you can see, the number of students scoring below in the winter dropped from the fall by almost half. Now let's look at NWA's map table, because while this data is impressive on its own, you will notice that below in the fall is when students were scoring 0 to 1, but in the winter, below would be any students who scored at the level 0, 1, and 2. So the students are closing the gap. The next 2 bars are comparing the number of students who were approaching benchmark expectation in phonological awareness. Again, the number of students in the approaching levels dropped from the fall and the winter, and again, the approaching benchmark has shifted up from a level 2 to a level 3 in the winter. Here's a similar look on how students did in phonics and word recognition. Thinking back to our previous slide, that was when students were assessed and they had to build the word chain, and when students had to read that word leaf and then pick the picture that matched. The first 2 bars, again, are comparing the number of students in the fall and winter who fell below benchmark expectations. As you can see, the number of students scoring below in the winter dropped significantly from the fall. And you also notice when you're looking at the expectations that again changed from that 0, 1 in the fall, expectations were below, to a 0, 1, 2. So the students needed to be a 3 or higher to get out of that below. The next 2 bars are comparing the number of students who were approaching benchmark expectation. Here we see the number of students approaching benchmark expectation actually increased from fall to winter. You may be wondering why this increase. Well, there's a couple of factors we should take into consideration. One would be most likely students move from that below expectation into approaching expectation in the winter from the fall. And again, this would mean moving from that 0, 1 level in the fall to a level 3 in the winter, which is a significant jump. Another factor that we must consider is the rigor and the complexity of the work the students are doing in phonics. It's definitely a little more rigorous than in phonemic awareness at this stage. The students are working hard to recognize a letter, put a sound to a letter. then hold that sound to the next letter and sound, and so on and so on and so on, as they blend those sounds together to lift print from the page, or we call reading. And reading is complex work. And then here's just one more look to see the impact that SIPS is having on our students. On the left side, we are looking at phonological awareness, so the raft and the shop question again. We have 3 bars here. The first bar represents the data from the students who are in SIPS beginning, which SIPS beginning you can consider like that's the first level of SIPS. So level 1, these students are a year or more below grade level. The SIPS beginning program has 55 lessons in it. Then the second bar represents the data from students who are in SIPS extension, which is the second level of SIPS. These students are considered a half a year below or less to grade level. SIPS extension has approximately 40 lessons in it. And the last bar represents the data from the students who have graduated or completed the SIPS program. As you can see from the chart, the number of students who are meeting and exceeding benchmark expectations, so that green and blue, has increases as they move from one level of SIPS beginning to extension to completion. This represents the data from the winter map data. This is where this was taken. And so if we look at that green and blue as we go from the beginning to the extension to now on grade level completed SIPS, you can see the progress the students are making towards grade level standards and benchmark. The chart on the right represents how these same students did in phonics and word recognition in the winter. This would be building the word chain,
We'll call
and then
this
also
work session to order. The items
reading.
on the agenda are district priorities update, academic interventions.
This is reading the word leaf and picking that picture
Yes,
that match,
and as
for
Dr.
example.
Boyson comes up, we have a few things that all kind of tie together in the academic interventions area that we're going to give an update today. The first is our SIPS program, which was expanded this year.
No idea.
Thank you.
So if we look back to the phonics and word recognition graph on the right, here you will notice more students in yellow in SIPS beginning in the winter. And again, that goes back to the complexity of reading or lifting that print from the page. You will notice a similar result, however, in the number of students meeting and exceeding benchmark expectation increases as those students move from SIPS beginning through SIPS extension and then through completing the program. SIPS closes the foundational reading gap for students and allows them to reach grade level expectation in a timely manner. As educators, we believe that the SIPS program is working based on the data that we see from SIPS and also from what we hear and see from the students reading and writing in the classroom every day. We see the impact that SIPS is having developing independent readers and writers, and so do the students and their parents. Here's one of several quotes that we have from parents this year on the effectiveness of SIPS, and I'll let you read that on your screen.
Parents are their child's first.
It's always a celebration when students complete or graduate from SIPS. It's sad to see them go, but we know that they have the skills to be successful readers and writers, and so we're so happy when they can close that gap to grade level quickly. Thank you.
And
So, Abby and Linda, we're going to stop here and ask if there's any questions on any of that information that we shared. I think the one thing on this graph here is to look at, and Abby did a really nice job explaining it, I appreciate that, and Linda with the map fluency, because they are two different things, but we wanted an outside look at measuring the effectiveness of SIPS, and that's where reading map fluency came in. So that phonological awareness are those beginning skills like Abby referenced, and then they move into phonics and word recognition. And so the complexity of those skills increases, but on here with map fluency, as we see more green and purple as they move along, or blue, It's really, they are mastering and holding those skills as measured by MAP. And that's what we wanted, because we could have used the SIPS assessment and just shown that data. But again, we know that there's how many lessons in beginning, Abby? 55. And then extension is 40. So there's 95 lessons the kids have to work through, and it's very systematic in that process. And that was that explanation, or that nice little video we were going to show you, that it shows them working through that, and it's the pace that goes with it and the confidence for the students as they grow through being a reader in that program. But then in MAP Fluency, they wear the microphone, they have to read from the screen. And I got the opportunity last year to go out while they were doing some of that spring assessment and watch. And we have these first graders reading paragraphs. And at the beginning of the year, they knew their letters and sounds. And so it's just great, and the confidence building for those students. But we'll stand by for any questions that anybody about the SIPS program at this point.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned Julie Treberg, because when we removed our previous reading intervention, she was one teacher who had reached out to me. So I'd gone to her classroom and said, we're going to find a replacement. What we're doing now isn't working, but we need to find a replacement. And I know she's very satisfied with this program. So thank you very much for mentioning her. And I think we'd be remiss when we were talking about funding on this. We also received a $600,000 gift from David and Christine Billion to also fund when we decided to expand the program too. And it's been a wonderful addition. But as we know, the ESSER funds and all those others are running out. So, hopefully most of the pandemic was part of the reason some of these students were behind. Hopefully that will taper out the number of students who need it, so that our funding mechanism can still be there, because obviously we believe this is an important program for our students and we want them all to succeed. So thank you.
And part of the literacy minor study, we added Haggerty into that kindergarten, first grade classrooms, and that support with the phonics. So we're anxious to see the spring results and next fall results too on the MAP assessments, just to see the impact that we're seeing with that too, and then how that builds, and maybe there won't be as many students that need SIPs moving into next school year. I'm sorry, Mr. Murray.
We have enough teachers now in the program. Teachers.
I believe so. I mean, right now, yes.
We keep quite a record disaggregated data just to see how many students are still on the wait list. And we monitor that, even some shifting amongst teachers to say, are you moving into second grade if first grade's been filled? So we're doing our best to meet the needs of students.
Well, and given that student achievement is one of our strategic goals of the district, the data that you're collecting surrounding SIPs and the outcomes are critically important, so that when we look at that long-term funding strategy, as Cynthia was alluding to, we have some real data to work with to know that we're achieving that and result in that is student achievement. So thanks.
I know the state chose Smarter Balance versus MAP Fluency for testing, and I believe that MAP is but is it still, do you believe it's the best one to do the testing on that? Because I know that's an additional, since Smarter Balance is free through our state. Yeah.
Right, so the MAP growth is what we had previously, and then MAP Reading Fluency came out, and really they took a deep dive in looking at, does it match what we want to measure, and that's why in K2 we have MAP Reading Fluency. So this will be the first year of full implementation of that. And then when we look at our first 2 classrooms of SIPS students would have been assessed during 2020. And so they weren't assessed. So last year, thinking about, okay, now ins and outs, quarantine, not quarantine, and that consistency, we didn't pull the data specifically on those students that had gone through SIPs, so we will very intentionally this year look back to see all of our students that have been in the SIPs program and how do they compare, knowing that, are they as same as their peers, because we'll have a control group, so we can look at that information, and we'll pull that out once that information comes along. So we have another data point to look at.
And would like for third graders who would have been first graders, right, 2020, what interventions?
They'd be fifth graders now, and
Yeah.
so,
Or no, first graders that are third graders now.
Oh.
Yeah, since this is K through 2,
Right,
or 1 through
right.
2, yeah.
but our first group would have been a third grader
Yeah.
in 2020, so they'd be fifth graders this coming up.
I guess what I'm thinking of is if a first grader was really needing SIPs, and then we went into the pandemic,
Oh, sure.
and then the next year was masking, and not phonetics was hard to do with masks, and then they're now in second grade, or third grade, I'm sorry, and what are we doing, or what can we
Yep.
do? Yeah.
So we don't have a specific intervention program at third, fourth, and fifth for reading, but they do, every building does have an intervention time. So that way they do help, if I'm in a third grade classroom, we maybe share students. So that way in our bar sets, we make sure that our reading sets, that we are focused on the skills that they, and they do use the map data to look at that and disaggregate it to really look at where the gaps are. And we do have the interim assessments at the state level through the South Dakota assessment that really dives deep into that also. So those teams really dig into that to see where they can support their students.
I have a quick question with that. So we don't have any reading intervention for third, fourth, and fifth graders. We have assessment tools, but no intervention.
But they work, yeah, go ahead. Yep.
As part of our minor study, we did recognize that these foundational skills were having an impact on kids' ability to read moving forward. And so we adopted integrity in K1 as a phonetical awareness approach for Tier 1 instruction. So that will happen with all students in the classroom. Integrity also then late in, I guess last summer, came out with a program called Bridge the Gap. And that is a tool that we have purchased for all of our classroom teachers. They have been trained, and it is more of an assessment, an placement, and then the teacher would pick and choose. So it is more of an intervention approach for foundational opening awareness skills for our 3, 4, 5 students as well. We've also discovered that because we recognize that maybe there is this missing link in there, that some of our second grade teachers have even gone down and picked up that integrity piece and used that in their Tier 1 approach. So again, this year we feel like we're putting a lot of pieces together and just anxious to see what that impact will be here in the spring with math reading fluency as well as self-assessment.
So we
So
have
the
the
teacher,
interventions. We don't
the-
have a specific teacher that, like in SIPs where we have a pull-out program, we don't.
There's
have
no pull-out program. That's up to the teacher with the other 25 to 30 kids.
You always have to remember our interventions at K1 and 2 are around that beginning ability to read. We have some level of assumption when you get to third, fourth, and fifth that now they have those foundational skills and you're working more on comprehension and fluency, but they can decode words, they can decode letters, and may need extra practice or specific leveled readers that may drop down just a bit. But I will say one of the challenges that happens that we're seeing in some schools is when we have students move in from somewhere else, particularly now during the pandemic where they have not had consistent schooling or been in good solid reading instruction, we may have now a fourth grader who comes in with some very rudimentary reading skills. Then you have to back up and pull in maybe SIPs or put a student who wouldn't typically be in that intervention, but that's kind of a new challenge that we're probably going to have to deal with maybe a little bit more. And it might be that we need to have a specific intervention for 3, 4, 5 if we're getting kind of those non-readers or very, very beginning reader scenarios with older students. It's a challenge with content, it's a challenge with scheduling, and then you always want to keep them with their cohort for that basic classroom instruction, but probably some wider gaps. So we'll watch that and see if that becomes even more of a trend. We hope not, but that's
yeah.
one thing we're seeing.
Given the learning gap that took place over the last couple of years, now those students would be in third grade no longer able to really qualify for that SIP. So that is something that's really important to look and be able to identify, and if we have the resources to do that sort of intervention given the anomaly of those couple of years.
And we do have
worthwhile.
schools that have adopted school-wide SIPs, so they are able to, at third grade, jump into some of those lessons. But at beginning entry level of SIPs, they need to know their
21 out of 26 letter names.
before they can even start in SIPs. So that's so important that we get those letter names and sounds in right away, so that way if they need the support, they can jump.
How long would you say for a student who is a year behind, how long does it take them to get through those 95 lessons? Is it an individual approach, or it's a group of people who are kind of at that same pace, or what is that like?
A little of both, I'll be honest. There's an assessment, a placement assessment, where you test into different levels.
Okay.
And so those levels in SIPs are indicative of where you start your lesson at. So some students in beginning might start at lesson 41. Well, then you know you have 55 lessons. You're just doing that many lessons in beginning and then moving over to extension.
Okay.
And there's 41, 31, 21, 11, and 1.
Okay.
So a student who starts at beginning 1 is very different from a student who starts at a beginning 41.
Sure.
And we watch that. We also watch that the students are mastering the skills within those lessons so that they can move on with the pace of their group. On average, over the last few years, the goals I've set is any student who starts at a beginning 21 should get through SIPs beginning and extension, so the 55 and then the 40, by the end of first grade, which is aligned to first grade standards, meeting the foundational skills benchmarks.
Okay.
So we can close that gap in a year for those students. Sometimes SIPs beginning 11 kids will surprise you, fill a few holes, and there they fly. And we intentionally work through that process, but it is very doable.
And then get other students in so we can backfill if we can get those kids to that graduation endpoint. And we know, I'll ask Abby, well, look at, they're approaching. Can't I jump those kids out? Mary said, no, we got to leave them in. They need to make sure they have all those skills so that way they can continue and sustain those skills. So,
Good.
So she keeps us in check.
Good work. Thank you for sharing.
All right. Thank you. With that, we're going to move on to the impact of the instructional coaches. So again, showing all the gears and where that curriculum, instruction, the learner, and the environment coincide, and all those gears have to keep turning to make sure that we have that successful learner at the end, get them to the finish line. So our instructional coach mission statement is to build teacher capacity, raise student achievement through a comprehensive collaborative approach to professional learning. And those instructional coaches really are that key to that classroom and the support for teachers of all teachers. So here's a little history on our instructional coach program. 2008, we had the Sioux Falls district started with 3 instructional coaches focused on literacy. In 2009, 7 additional coaches were added. And so we had a total of 11 coaches split between all the grade levels. In 2014, special education hired 5 instructional coaches. And then in right now, here's a breakdown of all our instructional coaches that support all different grade levels and specific content areas and their funding. So at elementary, we have 19 instructional coaches funded with Title I, II, and ESSER 3. We have our SIPs 1.7. Sarah's only at 0.75. So our SIPs instructional coaches Title 4 and ESSER 3. Middle school general fund, we have 4 instructional coaches, and one for each content area: ELA, math, science, and social studies. The same at high school, 4 content coaches. And then special education, we have 6, 3 at elementary and 3 at secondary. Our EL, our English learner instructional coaches, we have 3, 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high. And that's general Title II and Title III funding. And then Spanish immersion, we have 2 instructional coaches, 1 at elementary and 1 that is middle school, high school. So that's our history on our instructional coaches. And so then you might ask, well, what do they do all day long? Well, our instructional coaches, their main responsibility is to provide support for new teachers. Those first 2 years really focus on that. And then also veteran teachers. and really support the work that is going on in that classroom. And what's that look like? They model. So they can come in and they'll do some modeling of effective teaching strategies. They work on coaching cycles, and we're going to do a deeper dive into what a coaching cycle looks like, because we want to measure their impact. And through a coaching cycle, it's a collaborative effort between the teacher and the coach, and they identify an area. They work through that. They collect data, and we can show the results on that. And again, it comes back to student achievement and how does it impact their student achievement. And they work with collaboration. They help to participate in that model. The instructional coach provides strategies and support, maybe some assessment information to help teachers along that path. And then professional development, they're instrumental in helping us support, when you think we have 1,800 teachers, how do we support all those different content areas? How can I support, I think of high school, right now we're going through a science curriculum study. How many different, 20 different science courses, and how do we provide professional development and know our expertise in that? Think about math, think about all those different areas, and then they do provide great support there. And then they provide and share instructional resources for teachers that need that extra support. So break it down just a little bit more. That coaches support those beginning year teachers, and again, really focus on the retention of our new teachers, the support and the training they can provide so they're successful in that classroom. They feel like they have somebody that they can turn to help them. They provide that intensive coaching to improve classroom instruction. They assist the beginning year teachers in developing those models and those methodologies, strategies, and techniques. They develop classroom management, routines, and procedures. They help them with relationships. We talk about that's the most important part in the classroom. Help them to develop, what's that look like? I can't be your friend, but we can have that great relationship back and forth to support each other, the student and the teacher. And they help with all the induction programs. We have a new hire academy that the coaches help support, and then that connection. And then the biggest piece is the curriculum, the instruction, and the assessment. And if you think of our Plan, Do, Study, Act model, goes right along with our MTSS. They help with the curriculum. We ensure that we have a viable, guaranteed and viable curriculum. The instruction, it meets research-based practices, and our assessment. So again, we look at that to make sure that we complete that cycle. And there's our problem-solving model for the Sioux Falls School District, and you look in that yellow box. If we think about a coaching cycle, that coach works with the teacher. They identify a problem, and a problem's a big word, but is it a practice that I want to get better at? I'm struggling with writing in my classroom. How do I get better at that? So they have a conversation around that. The coach will come in, they'll watch the instruction, and then they'll come back, they'll have some feedback. The coach might model, and then they collect information. They go through that coaching cycle, and then they see the results. So they make a plan, they follow it, they study it, they act on those results. And we say that coaches should spend 60 to 70% of their time working directly with teachers. The other part is working with curriculum, and then other work that they have to do when working and support the teachers and the administration, the coordinators, the new curriculum, assessment, writing assessments. So how do we measure the impact of the instructional coach? Last year we purchased the KickUp tool, and KickUp is a monitoring software where coaches go in and they can record the time that they're working and where they're working and how they're supporting teachers. And as of February 22nd, we have 16,000 hours logged of the work that they're doing with teachers. And so that all those coaches are logging their hours. And what's that look like? So over 4,000 hours, they're working on instructional strategies with those teachers. 3,000 hours, they're working with curriculum, helping teachers to understand how to present that curriculum. They look at student work. Other would be professional learning, professional work with the building, supporting that program, classroom management. That's a big thing coming in as a brand new teacher. How do what's that look like in my classroom? Student engagement, academic feedback, assessment, and classroom culture. And classroom culture is really that relationship with with their students. And then we break it down even further, mentoring. So I'm mentoring that new teacher as part of our instructional coaches. They are the mentors for those new teachers for the first 2 years. They have to provide at least 34 hours with that new teacher. So each new teacher is guaranteed that number of hours with that instructional coach. Coaching cycles, again, it's working through that coaching cycle to improve their practice. Student-centered coaching, really focused on that student because that is our goal, is that we will have the coaches impact the student instruction or the student outcomes. Collaboration, professional learning, co-planning, data collaboration, really looking at that data and understanding that. Resource, provider, curriculum work, goal setting, and analyzing student work. So when we look at the information and we look at the relationship between professional learning and student results, that first one is really looking at coaching and standard-based professional learning is systematic, it's focused, and it has a greater potential of changing the teachers, what teachers know and are able to do if we can really focus that. And again, we have 1,800 teachers. How do I get all my third grade teachers on the same path across 23 elementary buildings with our curriculum to make sure that they're doing what we need to? 20 science courses. How do we get them all on that same rigor across 4 different high schools, making sure that what we're learning at Washington is the same thing we're learning at Roosevelt. So the second circle, so we need that systematic approach. Second one is when the teachers have the knowledge, the skills that are expected, they have a bigger toolbox for those strategies of instructional practices. Again, the coach can provide that continuity between that. And when educators improve their practice, the students have a greater likelihood of changing their skills. And when students have the results, again, it's all about the students, and we continue that cycle. And when we see those relationships with those coaching cycles, it really impacts what we're seeing in the schools, and it makes it visible for all. So, coaching cycles. Linda, do you want to talk just a little bit about some work that you've done with coaching cycles?
So I guess probably 2 years ago when Sue Macadero was still here, we started in with the instructional coaches working with Diane Sweeney's work of student-centered coaching. And really taking a look at, instead of just focusing on what the teacher was doing in the classroom, we started focusing on what were the kids doing, because that's where we needed to really focus on student outcomes and student achievement. And through the course of last year, coaches and elementary admin went through a book study and really talked about what would this look like in our, elementary buildings, and how would we ensure that the work we're doing with our teachers is based on standards, it's focused on students, and that we're showing that there's an impact over time. And as a result, we have just really delved into Diane Sweeney's work of student-centered coaching. In fact, she's in Sioux Falls today and tomorrow, working with our elementary coaches. We were in a classroom today where in the morning, we were working with a classroom teacher and that coach and just observing the work that they're engaging in. And then this afternoon, we were actually in a classroom with kids, watching what those kids were doing and being able to provide each other with strengths-based feedback. So a coaching cycle really does start off with this, taking a look at what is the teacher needing support with. So maybe it's a writing unit that they'd like to have just another set of eyes and some support with. So we then tie it to a standard. We take a look at what are our learning intentions, so what do we want the students to learn, and then how are we going to know they've learned it? So what is that success criteria? How will we know that kids are being successful? So those are kind of the first steps, and then we start talking about what's going to happen throughout that coaching cycle. We're going to need to be able to do some co-planning together to make sure that we really understand the rigor that needs to happen within the coaching cycle, which can be up to 6 weeks long. So this is a long-term relationship and partnership that coaches and teachers engage with. And then as they move through, it's continually, what are we noticing? We're watching kids. We're noticing and naming. We're being very intentional about the instructional moves that we're making in that classroom. And sometimes it's just right in the moment where that teacher and coach are thinking aloud, right with students in front of them. Here's what I hear, here's what I'm seeing, let's try this, so that we can have that immediate impact. At the end of that coaching cycle, we have our pre and post baseline data that will be able to provide us with that information of how the students have grown. But we also want to know exactly how our teachers have grown too, because the goal is that when the coach walks out of the classroom, that we've built the capacity of the classroom teacher to continue that work. And really what we're experiencing is that teachers are just eating up this opportunity to work with a coach and just re-enlisting. So we finished this unit, let's just start with the next one. They just are finding such value in having that thought partner.
And that's some of the data that we thank you, Linda. That's some of the data that we have up here, and it's posted in one of our buildings that they have their pre-assessment data is the top graph, their post-assessment data is that second graph.
Parents are their child's
and they're
first
making it visible. And we've asked elementary principals to have their teachers share after they've gone through a coaching cycle, so that way they can hear the impact that their colleagues are having, and then it encourages others to seek that. So that first one is really looking at adding on, counting backwards, subtracting, adding 3, and that first, the red column is not yet, the yellow column's growing, the green column's got it, and exceeding expectation, and that's as measured on the MAP assessment. So again, they're using that outside assessment to measure the results. So after going through that coaching cycle, you can see that the growth for those students. And that second one is really looking at using the RAP strategy, so restate, answer, and prove my information. So it's a higher level thinking after they've done some reading, and this one was on the American Revolutionary War. And so you can see not yet, growing, got it, and exceeding. And then we have another example too. Again, making that data visible for people and really training our teachers so they have the confidence to move forward and gaining those skills. And at middle school and high school, they're doing coaching cycles also, and seeing the impact that they can have with the teachers, because that's the goal, is how do we improve our instruction of our teachers, which again transcends to our students.
Teresa, can I just interrupt there real quick? I just saw these examples today, and what we don't have up here, they have their pictures next to these in the hallway. And the other byproduct of this has been when students walk by and they point to their teacher and the progress that their class made, and they say, look what we did. That is really courageous work for teachers to put their pictures and their classwork and their growth up to be visible. So that's
For all
something to
see.
be commended. Yeah, anybody who walks through their school, they're just really proud of it. They've done the same thing with office referrals so that the kids can see the progress and some really impressive things.
So good stuff. And it's one thing for me to put my assessment results out with my team, but to put it out in the hall for all my colleagues or parents or anybody that walks by to see. And here I am taking pictures of it as I'm like, Nikki, I'm taking pictures. No, I don't. But I was taking pictures. So again, it's that problem solving model. As that coach and that teacher work together, they plan, do, study, act, make a plan, move it forward, study the results, and move forward with additional results. And Dr. Fedden loves this model. And so just coaching matters. And these are comments from teachers, and that's the thing. We wanted to measure the impact, and so coaching does matter. My coach provides me coaching that is relevant to my needs rather than just giving me the same information that everybody else gets. So it's really targeted support for me. Very supportive as a new teacher, gave me great advice for setting priorities, helped me sort through things that I could change to be more effective. Coach helped me reflect on past lessons and learn from it, helped me understand great strategies. Appreciate the help in developing lessons and units. Also, that played a devil's advocate and asked me really hard questions to prompt their thinking, It's a good listening ear, non-judgmental, helpful brainstorming and helping with problems to support students. And then we have some examples of coaches and teachers working together, co-planning, really looking at aligning their vision with data points to give the next steps. And in this case, the admins step in so that way the coach and the teacher can work together. So that admin's teaching in the classroom to help support this process for short periods of time. My coach has been phenomenal, fundamental part of my success in the first year as a teacher in the district. And then here, Dreambox is a math program. And if teachers align the gaps the students have with lessons and support that and really target it, we can help to fill the gaps. But if they don't, then the kids just go on and they work through the program and it doesn't help to backfill. So that's really an important process. So the coaches help the new teacher be able to know which lessons to assign and work through that process together so they can fill those gaps, and they set up that tracking system. And so that teacher appreciates that, and so do the kids in the classroom. And then they help their helpful strategies concerning lesson planning, Kagan structures, which we had that training for student engagement on high impact instructional strategies and student-centered and creative. So again, our instructional coach model really follows that MTSS essential elements. So we think about shared leadership. We could just be in silos. But again, we know we have to work together. It has to be curriculum, it has to be assessment, it has to be our admin, it has to be our teachers for the impact on our students. And we have that layered continuum of support. We're not just going to work with a curriculum and assessment, but we want to reach all learners. We want to be able to reach the learners that are at the top of the spectrum, the learners that are at the bottom, and how do we feed them all together? And then, again, communication, conversations, collaboration, and partnerships. It's the whole team based on data. How do we move that forward using a plan, do, study, act model with evidence-based structures, research-based curriculum to get the outcomes that we want. And coaching matters. All these different components are built into that coaching program to support teachers for students in the Sioux Falls School District. So with that, we'll stand by for questions. No, Sophia?
I know.
And teared up.
Try not to give you many.
Passionate. Did that help?
Yeah. The wonderful thing, this is great information for leading into budget season and so forth, which is a reminder, we have a second work session in March 30th for our first budget work session, but good information to help, since we won't have all the money we've had in the last 18 months from the federal government, that what's important, what's working, and so forth. So really appreciate this information.
Just a quick, are you feeling okay? More of a practical question, and just, it sounds like the coaching just plays such a huge role in each of these buildings, given that each coach spends 70% of their time with the teachers. I'm just curious how principals and the assistant principal fit into this coaching world.
Yep, no, that's a great question, because we know that the principal, the leader in the building, has to be the instructional leader. And so that's the work that the coaches and the admin have done together to really help build that instructional leadership within that building. So they do work and plan together for what does good teaching and learning look like, and that's the work with student-centered coaching that has been happening in that professional learning together. So they're growing together. We do have very specific lines, though, we have our vision, and we all know what good teaching and learning looks like together. But when a coach goes in to do a student-centered coaching, I'm not sharing information with my admin, because those lines we have to have that trust that I can be vulnerable with my coach if I'm struggling. And so they're not going to run back to my admin to report that Teresa's an ineffective teacher of writing.
I think maybe I have a different definition of the coaching. How are the principal and vice principal at each of those buildings, how are they incorporating coaching for their teaching staff within their day? What percentage of their time, given that these coaches are spending 70% of their time with the teachers, how are the principal and vice principal encouraging the teaching? I'm not suggesting there's any kind of a
No crossover. So as an
unhealthy dynamic.
Right, as an admin, I'm in the classroom, I'm doing walkthroughs, I'm doing drop-ins, observing the classroom instruction, seeing what's happening within that classroom, giving my feedback to those teachers, and then also through the formal practices, my professional learning that I do with my staff is important and focused on instruction. It could be curriculum, it can be professional learning. So I'm responsible, I'm the leader for the instructional practices in that building as an admin.
And remember, our coaches are focused most of their time on our new teachers. You have that entire staff that principal and assistant principal are focused on. So I would say it's almost like our coaches provide some SIPs for our newer teachers. It's that intensive mentoring versus the regular overall instructional leadership that our administrators provide and set those conditions for how they use their time, how they all orchestrate together and provide complementary guidance for PLC work, and just kind of that whole picture. So they're collaborators. What Teresa, I think, was pointing out is they're not evaluators, they're mentors and shoulder partners in instruction.
What does our retention look like for beginning, like year 1 to 5 for those teachers? I'm just wondering if we're doing the best job in the state of coaching new teachers and where they go from there and how that.
I did pull that data, and I don't know. Becky, did we share that data retention of our first 5 years?
It was in the,
Yeah, I thought it was in Becky's report. So that's something that we can pull right now. I don't have it right now. Right. I did think about that this morning. I wonder who's going to ask that question. So we will get that for you.
Awesome. Thanks.
any other questions for Dr. Boyson? And I don't believe anyone signed up for public input, so we will move on to, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned.
Sorry.